You have to read the writings of one of the key Soviet defectors, maybe the most important Soviet defector, at least in my mind. His name was Anatoly Golichin. And he defected through Finland, came to the United States, tried to tell the Americans, Canadians what was going on. The government wouldn't listen. So finally, he wrote some books about what was going on. He made a series of 206 very specific predictions. Of those, over 200 have come true to the T. He even gave us the names of the people.
And welcome back. And joining us today is returning guest Alex Newman, who is an international award-winning journalist, author, and the founder of Liberty Sentinel. He's also the senior editor of the New American magazine. Alex, how you been?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Christian. Great to be here.
No shortage of interesting topics to cover. I figured we'd start off with kind of your latest thoughts of what you're seeing out there, conversations you're having. What do you feel is most germane at this time?
Well, I think one of the macro trends that's happening right now, even though most people aren't catching it, is a radical reshuffling of the world order. We're watching with this conflict in Iran, with this conflict in Ukraine, with some of what the U.S. government is doing, the financial situation of various governments. We're watching a shift from what they used to call the unipolar world order toward this multipolar world order. And it's something that I've had my eyes on for 15 years. When I like to read the words of key deep staters and the insider publications. And so one of the publications I read is Foreign Affairs. That's the magazine of the Council on Foreign Relations. It's kind of like deep state headquarters in the United States, if you will. They don't openly advocate it, but it's very clear that by and large, the globalist class feels that it's time for a new type of world order where you don't have a country like the United States, founded on biblical principles, founded on the idea of individual liberty granted by God, as the sole unchallengeable hegemonic power. So we're, I think, watching right now what I like to refer to as the controlled demolition of the United States of America, economically, militarily, socially, culturally, so that in the place of that old world order, we can get this new multipolar world where you have multiple poles of power, especially Beijing. I think ultimately they want all roads to lead to Beijing. You've got Moscow, you've got the BRICS, you've got Brussels, the headquarters of the European regime. And so I think that's one of the really significant trends that's taking place. And people are focusing on the day to day, like, oh, is the Strait of Hormuz open? Oh, it's not open anymore. That stuff's important. But we need to be looking at the big picture here. And the big picture is that the world is changing very rapidly. And people need to be paying attention to this.
Absolutely. Would you say that, some say that, you have one side of the camp will say, the BRICS is a good guy. They're going up against the globalists of the West, so to speak. And I'd love to hear your take because I lean more towards that. There's more central control, that there's this, dialectic going on, so to speak. And that there is basically kayfabe or theater at bay. What would your I guess how would you render that?
Yeah, I think the notion that the BRICS are somehow standing up against the evil New World Order, Vladimir Putin likes to say, well, the West is run by satanic pedophiles. Like, yeah, that's kind of true. But, you're a young global leader of the World Economic Forum, right? So you have been intimately connected with the satanic pedophile Western elites, as he likes to refer to it, your entire career, right? Even go back to your KGB days. Of course, we need to remember that Vladimir Putin was buddy-buddy with Henry Kissinger, one of the key architects of this new world order before he went to hell. And, he's been very close to the instruments of Western power all along. And if you go back far enough, you see the Western globalist mega bankers actually funded the Bolshevik Revolution. They gave millions of dollars to Leon Trotsky and Vladimir Lenin to overthrow the Tsarist government and basically enslave that giant empire. So when you look at the different governments that make up the BRICS, you find that same pattern over and over and over again. China is another really good example. The U.S. government deliberately betrayed our ally, Chiang Kai-shek, the leader of the Free Chinese. They put an arms embargo on the poor guy after he had lost an enormous number of men fighting side by side with Americans against the Japanese. In fact, with my grandfather, right, who fought in World War II against the Japanese. So we helped bring the communists to power in China. You might even say we brought the communists to power in China. The elite opinion makers in the United States were portraying Chairman Mao as he's just an agrarian reformer. And meanwhile, Chiang Kai-shek was a fascist dictator. No, he was a pro-America Christian guy who believed in individual liberty. So they had to take him out. You look at South Africa. Same thing. They acted like the government of South Africa was the number one threat to the world. And so the Soviets were backing terrorist organizations. The American government was backing communist terrorist organizations. The UN was backing communist terrorist organizations. And then they brought this communist totalitarian regime that's now bent on property confiscation, genocide, etc., into power. So all this is well documented. Same thing in Brazil, right? And I've lived in a lot of these countries, Christian. I've been to almost all of them. I just got back from India last year. I've been to Russia. I lived in Brazil. I've lived in South Africa. So I'm very familiar with the BRICS. And if you look at what's going on in Brazil, same exact situation. The illegitimate president there, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, is basically a creation of the deep state. And him and Fidel Castro, who also incidentally was brought to power by the U.S. government, as exposed by our own U.S. ambassador to Havana, Earl Smith. He wrote a whole book about it called The Fourth Floor. You look at what's going on here and you see the whole modus operandi, the whole program of the BRICS is coming out of the Western world. In fact, even the term BRICS came from a Goldman Sachs banker. So we need to stop being foolish here and acting like the Chi-Coms and the Russians are going to save the day. In fact, I think if you really want to understand where they think this is going, you have to read the writings of one of the key Soviet defectors, maybe the most important Soviet defector, at least in my mind. His name was Anatoly Golitsyn. And he defected through Finland, came to the United States, tried to tell the Americans, Canadians what was going on. The government wouldn't listen. So finally, he wrote some books about what was going on. So he came out of the Department D, the disinformation department of the KGB, and he said they were working on long-range strategic deception to dupe the United States and dupe the West into believing that communism had actually crumbled and that everything was fine and dandy now. What he said was it's all going to be fake. He made a series of 206 very specific predictions. Of those, over 200 have come true to the T. He even gave us the names of the people involved. He pointed to Lech Walesa in Poland, the leader of the Solidarity Union, who apparently took down the big bad communists. Anatoly Golitsyn said the guy's a KGB operative. Now we've got some of the KGB archives. We know, yes, he was. His code name was Bolek, right? So we're being deceived in a massive way. And the last of these predictions that Anatoly Golitsyn made was that we would see he said the Soviet Union would collapse. He said Eastern Europe would become liberalized. The communists would stay in power. They would rebrand themselves. The Berlin Wall would come down, etc. But the last of the predictions was that we would see what he described as a second October revolution, where the Russians and the Communist Chinese and their allies around the world would basically take down what was left of the United States, a severely weakened United States, and build a global totalitarian system. Now, from his vantage point, this was a Soviet plot. I think from what we know about this, including some of the things that I just described about who brought these evildoers to power, we have to understand it's actually deeper than just a Soviet plot. It was a Soviet plot, but we got to look at the man behind the curtains. And I think that's their agenda. Right? At some point, they'll pull the plug on the United States, they'll pull the plug on the dollar. We'll have the Russians and the Chinese use their overwhelming military and economic power. They're buying up all the gold right now, right? Don't forget the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. And we'll be in this new multipolar world where the United States will be one among many, if we're fortunate. And the real shots will be called by autocratic totalitarian governments and the institutions that they're building, like the UN, like these regional governments, in preparation for a full-blown global totalitarian system.
Spooky stuff. And as it relates to the BRICS nations and things of that nature, or even non-BRICS, I mean, you just see this kind of gradual rollout of it, so to speak. I mean, obviously in China, with the social credit and a myriad of other things that they have to track you and what you're doing. Actually, tangentially just saw something today that there's something that's going to be put in vehicles. I don't know the veracity of this, but I just saw a post on X about all new cars in U.S. will track your eye movements, face, head position, attention, drowsiness, et cetera, et cetera. Now, I don't know, again, how accurate that is. I just saw that, but you do see in other parts of the world it going on. And so I think those in the West, particularly those domestically here in the U.S., are kind of bereft of it, especially the energy shock and the shortages going on. I think people just see this and it's like, well, that'll never happen to us. We're in our bubble. We have the strategic petroleum reserve. We got this and that. We're exporting oil, to have all these other countries that need it to come here to our ports to go take it back to theirs. So, very very alarming. And I wanted to touch on as it relates to the Middle East and what you're seeing going on out there. Could you, if you care to touch on that, Any interesting wrinkles to conversations that you've been having, et cetera?
Well, I think the war in Iran is turning out very poorly for everyone involved, except maybe the Iranians and their backers in Beijing and Moscow, which is, of course, not what I want, not what we should want as Americans. But I mean, that's the reality. We're talking about a $200 billion price tag. My guess is it's significantly higher. When you hear top government officials say, "Oh, we got plenty of missiles. No, nobody's worried about missiles. We got plenty of missiles." The obvious implication is they're running out of missiles real quick, and that should concern everyone. The Iranians and the Russians are gathering incredible intelligence now about the U.S. military's capabilities. What has happened economically speaking is going to be absolutely devastating. The drying up of LNG, liquefied natural gas, is going to be catastrophic. That's an essential precursor to making fertilizer, which of course is an essential precursor to making food, which kind of most people kind of depend on food. So I think we're going to see some very, very serious economic ripple effects from this. And if we don't find some kind of resolution pretty quickly, I think it is going to um, possibly expand into something much larger. I mean, we know the globalists have wanted the equivalent of a third world war for a long time. The Israelis have been pretty clear that for them it's unacceptable that these ayatollahs and the mullahs stay in power. They have been very clear that regime change is the only acceptable option. Whether they can accomplish that on their own without American support, I don't know. Whether they can accomplish that even with American support is another question entirely. The Iranians have been preparing for this for a very long time. They've got a lot in place. And again, they're not just this isolated little pariah regime. They've got friends in high places like Beijing and Moscow who are helping them very, very openly. So this looks really bad to me. I don't know where it goes from here. I know there's a lot of people who say Trump's playing 4D chess, 5D chess. I wish I could buy into that. I do think Trump has been convinced that this is essential. I think he has been briefed on the threat that Communist China poses to the United States and how Iran is essentially the Middle Eastern proxy for the CCP. Why he hasn't articulated that publicly to the United States, I don't know yet. But I don't think this is going anywhere good, unfortunately. It's a very concerning situation. And, for Americans, we've got a lot of money. We'll probably be okay when it comes to the food things. But if you're living on a few bucks a day and you're barely able to afford rice to feed your children, a doubling of food prices, which I don't think is entirely unrealistic considering what's happening now, unless we find a real quick resolution to this, that's going to result in widespread famine, widespread starvation. And we know that the globalists have been working on that for years. In fact, I've been going around the country speaking about the war on farmers. It was going on right here in the United States until Trump stopped some of it when he took office after Joe Biden, who was killing all our chickens and all the rest of it. So, I'm not trying to be a doom monger here. I just want people to recognize that there's really serious dark clouds on the horizon. And we don't want to be Pollyannish, right? The Bible says that the prudent sees danger and prepares or takes cover, and the fool just keeps walking along and pays the price. Don't be the fool, right? Be the prudent one. Niccolo Machiavelli, whatever you think of him, he understood power and politics better than just about anybody. That's why all the leaders wanted his opinion. He said in The Prince, which is a very interesting book, that one of the most common defects in man is that during the calm, he doesn't prepare for the storm. So, folks, there's a calm right now, sort of, depending on what part of the world you're living in. But don't wait until the waves are crashing around your house to say, maybe we should be taking some common sense preparations and precautions here.
I actually for the first time in my life began just kind of buying extra stuff that I may need. Just buying one or two extra items, and I have fuel set aside, and I had never done that before. But just because I don't know what might happen here, but I'm pretty confident that going into the summer we're going to see prices go up because again, a lot of people, diesel, oil, gas, I mean, all that is going to be passed on to the consumers. I saw something even on Amazon when make your order your items. One of the vendors received something because of obviously prices going up, oil, fuel, et cetera, that they're going to have to pass that on to customers. So I think we're going to see a lot more people having a carpool or work multiple jobs, figure out what they need to do to provide for themselves in this controlled demolition thesis that you're sharing, which I subscribe to as well. It's a lot of this stuff. is meticulously, I think, very well thought out at the hidden power, the shadow government, and it's very alarming. Wanted to, I was looking at, I was also going to mention, I was looking at some of the articles that you or posts that you had made. One was titled "Communist China Being the Biggest Threat to the United States," and then the other one was pertaining to the Bilderberg group, obviously, which just had its, I think it's wrapped it up by now, its meeting. Could you dive into that a bit?
Sure. So the Bilderberg is a really, really important annual meeting. It's, I would say, secretive, not secret. For a long time, it was secret, and if you mentioned it, you were called a conspiracy theorist, and there's no such thing, and the fake media would lie about you. Now they have a website, and they put out an annual press release, and they give you at least a partial list of the people who are attending, and they give you a list of topics that are going to be discussed. But every year, it brings together about 120 to 150 of the most powerful people in the world, and their lapdogs and their minions, and people that I think they're grooming for potential positions of future influence. So we've seen a very consistent pattern here where these no-name political hacks and media hacks show up at Bilderberg, and then suddenly the next year they're like president or prime minister or CEO. So there's a lot of that going on there. But they just had a very early meeting. Typically, these meetings happen, late summer or fall. I've been to some, obviously never as an invited guest. I snuck into one and went to Copenhagen to try to talk to some of these people. I think it was in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, and we did get to talk to some of them. And they're not supposed to say anything publicly about what they're doing, but sometimes they do. And if you just piece together the public comments that have been made by attendees, steering committee members, first of all, it's very clear that they are globalist in orientation. Their main mission, and one of the key leaders actually described this publicly, tried to put a happy face on it, but their main mission is to bring about global governance. And his point was, well, our thinking was that if we just leave things as they are, people are going to keep fighting and killing each other. So we thought a global community would be the best thing for everybody. So they're openly working toward this global system. They bring together some of the top leaders in big tech, obviously politics. There were several key people from the Trump administration there, which I find disturbing. Cabinet secretaries, actually the Secretary of the Army was there. The U.S. Trade Representative was there, and of course on foreign trade, free trade, so-called. That's one of the areas where Trump and his administration have been most vigorously pursuing the same agenda as the globalists, surrendering our sovereignty to North American institutions under the USMCA, for example. So this is an important meeting, and I don't know why they met so early this year. I would love to know. I didn't go this year. But it's a very important group. And actually, I've got a revised second edition of my book on the deep state coming out. We have a whole chapter on Bilderberg because it's really one of the key power centers of the globalist establishment movement. And, what we know from what has come out over the years should really concern everybody. I mean, one of the founders, one of the key founders, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands, was literally a Nazi SS officer. Like, do we really want a weirdo, secretive group founded by a Nazi deciding global policy? I would argue that that's probably a pretty bad idea. And yet here we are. So I hope people will pay attention.
That's fascinating. Between the Bilderberg Group and the Committee of 300 and Council of Foreign Relations and Club of Rome and all these other groups and what they're planning. And then I was trying to think of another thing as it relates to that. I'm just tracking that. To your point, multipolar world that we're entering. I do think things are theater basically, and that this is a controlled demolition. I think with what's going on, this has been part of a grand design. Energy shocks going on, shortages in other parts of the world, the social stuff, the protests going on that we are seeing escalate over in Ireland in particular. We see you mentioned about farmers here in the U.S., but even over in Europe as well. And then also the financial backdrop of things, how it's just looming more and more, private credit, the bond market, et cetera. And I was also going to comment on, it just seems like they are just kind of marching us along here. What are perhaps some other things that are not receiving enough attention these days?
Well, I've just done several major articles on what's happening on the education front. I mean, the picture is absolutely dire. One of the articles I did just a few weeks ago, the government's own numbers show that something like 17% of children in government schools are going to be victims of sexual abuse or misconduct at the hands of faculty. That doesn't include the children who are being sexually abused by other kids at school, et cetera, like that. That's crazy. If you knew your kid had a 1 in 5 chance of being sexually abused by a babysitter, would you hire that babysitter? Well, of course you wouldn't, right? Unless you were insane. And yet, 60 million children every day of 5 days a week are going off to these brainwash camps. A new study that just came out in California. I just wrapped up my article a few minutes ago. 94% of teens and young adults in California, ages 14 through 25, report mental health challenges. So, like, virtually all young people in California claim to be facing mental health challenges. What in the world is going on here? You dig into the latest CDC data on this. 40% of students in government schools report what they described as persistent feelings of hopelessness and sadness. 20% reported seriously considering suicide. 10% reported that just in the last year, they actually tried to kill themselves. If you hired a babysitter and you knew there was a 1 in 10 chance that your son or daughter would kill him or herself under the supervision of that babysitter, would you hire that babysitter? And of course, the answer is no. And yet, parents continue sending their children to these brainwash camps. The government's latest education data came out. Less than 1 in 3 are proficient in anything, right? In English, math, science, history. And that's the government's numbers. The reality is far worse than that. These kids are dumber than they've ever been. They're more messed up in the head than they've ever been. They don't even know what bathroom to go into, for crying out loud. They think they're furries. I mean, how bad does it have to get? I mean, they're literally castrating your sons. They're literally removing healthy breasts from your daughters. At what point do you say, no, you're not going to be doing that to my children anymore? Well, they're now working on closing the emergency exits. I just did an article last week about lawmakers in the state of Connecticut. They just came up with a bill, and it already moved through the Joint Education Committee. That's the House and the Senate together. That purports to mandate that all homeschoolers provide what the text of the legislation describes as an equivalent education to what's going on in the government schools. Based on just what I just described, why would you want anyone to have an equivalent education to the garbage that's going on in the government schools? You want your children to be sexually abused, suicidal, dumb as a box of rocks? Like, why would you do that, right? New Jersey, same thing. They had a bill last year that would require public school students to use curricula that was approved by the government that was aligned with the New Jersey state learning standards, which are total garbage, which are mass producing illiterates who literally can't read their high school diploma. What's going on here? Well, what's going on here is the globalist establishment has decided that there must be no more escape. So last year in October, the UNESCO, the UN's education agency, released a report literally prepared under the supervision of a North Korean communist. I wish I was kidding, but I'm not. It was called Homeschooling Through a Human Rights Lens. And anybody can read this. It says, if governments decide that they're going to allow and tolerate homeschooling, we got to stop with this free for all, right? Parents cannot be trusted to educate their own children. It says the state is the primary duty bearer when it comes to educating children, and therefore the government needs to have mandatory registration, like you're a sex offender. They need to have mandatory home visits, which, by the way, the Connecticut bill does. You need to get permission from the child welfare services to be able to homeschool your own children. You need to take mandatory tests. The UN says the government needs to dictate what you teach your children, all the way down to the values that you teach their children. They need to be aligned, it says, with the UN and its international treaties and agreements. So they are full on waging a war on homeschooling, on private schools. Last year, the UN dispatched its UN special rapporteur on the right to education. And boy, did she have nasty things to say about the United States. How dare states like Florida and Texas try to protect children from LGBT race-mongering propaganda? How dare the federal government suggest that it's not going to oversee everything, et cetera, et cetera. So bad news on that front as well. The good news is you can still, in any one of the 50 states, pull your children out of these brainwash camps immediately. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you do. My wife and I, we homeschool our 6, wouldn't trade it for the world. We use a program called Classical Conversations that we love, but there's lots of really good ones out there. And I would encourage people to pay attention to this, because this is one of the most important decisions you will make in your life, how your children are going to be educated.
Well, it's crazy how much your environment shapes you. for most of high school, I was, I mean, effectively homeschooled. I did like an online studies program, believe it or not. And high school just wasn't working out for me, so, or the freshman year and even before that in school. So you know, I recognize it's everybody's different in terms of the socializing elements, but I think that if you're in a situation as we're in respects to the schooling system, yeah, it would behoove you to entertain it, to look at it. Yeah, there's a lot of inculcation going on, that's for sure. Um, Alex, is there anything else that you'd like to share in light of time? I know we only have so much time together, but yeah, it seems. It just seems, yeah, you've got just a myriad of different things going on socioeconomically, politically. So, well, how about I'll ask you this: the gentleman running for Florida, I've been seeing that. What's your take on him? What's the sentiment been like?
Who are you talking about? Byron Donalds that Trump endorsed?
Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm totally blanking out on the guy's name. He has been very vocal
So the key
about
ones we've got Byron
yeah.
Donalds, we've got Paul Renner, who is the former Speaker of the House, we've got James Fishback, who's kind of really attracting a lot of young people to his campaign,
I think it's
and
Fishback.
we've got
I
Lieutenant
think
Governor
that's him.
Collins. Fishback.
My
Okay.
gosh.
So I don't know him personally, although I've seen some of what he has been doing. He's definitely attracting a lot of support and attention from the young people. I'll tell you, the Florida establishment absolutely despises the guy. A lot of kind of the grassroots Christian conservatives won't entertain him for various reasons, but he is
Mhm.
certainly making a big splash with the young people. I think he's going to have a real uphill battle. Trump's endorsement is unfortunately uh, decisive in a lot of these races, as you know. And
Mhm.
so Byron Donalds, I think, thinks he's just going to scoot through here with no problem. And we'll see, right? Historically, that's been the case. Trump's endorsement means a lot, and Trump usually only endorses when he thinks a candidate is already going to win. He doesn't like to pick losers, as he says. He only wants to pick winners. So I think there's a lot of confidence that Byron Donalds is going to win. But he's facing some headwinds too. Elements of his background have come out that have been very controversial. There's a lot of Christians who don't like him for various reasons, and so we'll see.
Yeah, he's backed, what's his name? Steve, something, running for governor here of California.
Hilton.
Yeah, Steve Hilton. Yeah. And so, it's, I mean, out over here, it's just, it's, yeah, it's, it, all the world's a stage. I think there's a lot of truth to that. Alex, is there anything else that you'd like to share? And also, how can people learn more about you as well as get in touch?
Well, thank you, Christian. I appreciate it. I would encourage people to follow the climate thing, right? This is actually our latest cover story on this issue. I went down to the Amazon rainforest to expose. This is actually their official guardian spirit right here. That's what they said. It's a gift from the Communist Chinese to the UN. Nice little demon there with some demon horns and some fangs holding the world in its hands. Isn't that cute? So we'll be going to the next one, hopefully in Turkey. People don't realize how significant the climate scam still is. Yes, Donald Trump's gotten us out of all the stuff, but the global elite are still beating this dead horse. They're using it as a pretext to repaganize the world. So keep your eyes on that. And speaking of repaganizing the world, in a few months, we intend to go to the premier New Age weird party festival in the desert. So can't reveal too many of our cards just yet, but we'll have much more on that. I think this is one of the big trends that people aren't paying attention to is the the effort by those in charge to reverse the gains of Christianity and the gospel and to try to repaganize the world. We'll see where it goes, but I think it's one of the big stories of the day. And people can find us Twitter. It's Alex Newman _JOU. You can go to our website, libertysentinel.org, sign up for our newsletter for free, thenewamerican.com. We do the free daily headlines. Even if you don't subscribe to the print magazine, you can still get all the key news of the day in your inbox. And classicalconversations.com is a great place for people who want to homeschool. I'm on the board of Freedom Project Academy. It's an online K through 12 Christian school. If people want to do kind of an online school, like you, Christian, I didn't do well in high school. I actually got kicked out when I was like in 10th grade and never went back. But for those who do want to pursue high school diploma, those are some really great options. And thank you for having me on the program, Christian. It's always great to see you.
Hey, likewise, I really appreciate you. Be well, and I know we'll be in touch here soon.
Very good. Thank you, sir. God bless you.
I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked it, I encourage you to like, share, /subscribe. The show's on YouTube, Spotify, etc. And I always look forward to hearing your feedback. Be well. Take care. Thanks.